There's only one at a time, John. I mean, you know, they may come and go, but there's only one at a time. And I'm not going to tell you.
Yes, and I like the idea of being a part of a series that has dealt with some socially significant things rather than just your everyday comedy.
She was the woman who could silence a room with a single glance. A Broadway powerhouse who became television's quick-witted rebel, and later the queen of every horror fan's dreams. Adrienne Barbeau's name once blazed across marquees from New York to Hollywood. But behind the fame was a story the cameras never told. To millions, she was Carol Trainer on Maude, the confident, outspoken daughter who challenged every rule. Yet while audiences laughed, Adrienne was quietly fighting a different kind of battle against the image that Hollywood tried to trap her in. She didn't want to be just another pretty face or a scream queen built for posters and magazine spreads. She wanted to be taken seriously. But every time she tried to escape that box, the industry pulled her right back in. From the smoky stages of Grease to the fog-covered coastlines of John Carpenter's thrillers, Adrienne's journey was filled with triumph, heartbreak, and quiet defiance. She was loved by audiences, adored by directors, and often misunderstood by both. And while the world remembers her for those unforgettable eyes staring into the mist, few know the truth about the woman who stood behind them. A woman who turned rejection into resilience, pain into art, and fear into freedom. This is the untold story of Adrienne Barbeau, the actress who refused to play the part Hollywood wrote for her, and the shocking twists that turned her from Broadway's brightest star into one of the most mysterious icons of American entertainment. Before the lights, the fame, and the screams, Adrienne Barbeau's story began in the most unexpected of places. Sacramento, California. Born in June 1945, she wasn't raised in the glitz of Hollywood or surrounded by famous faces. Her roots were ordinary, her beginnings humble. Her father worked hard to keep the family afloat, while her mother, a descendant of Armenian immigrants, carried stories of struggle and survival that would quietly shape Adrienne's grit. Growing up, she wasn't the kind of girl anyone expected to end up on a Broadway stage or a movie screen. Yet even as a child, there was something in her voice, a strength that refused to be silenced. In school, she found herself drawn to performing, not because she wanted attention, but because she loved the rush of connecting with people. By the time she reached her teens, Adrienne had outgrown the small-town expectations that surrounded her. She briefly attended college, but the routine felt lifeless. She wanted more, something raw, unpredictable, and real. So she left, packed her things, and joined a touring company performing for the U.S. Army. It was a decision that baffled everyone around her, but for Adrienne, it was a doorway. Night after night, she entertained soldiers stationed far from home, learning to hold an audience with charm, grit, and confidence. Those experiences toughened her. Long bus rides, makeshift stages, unpredictable crowds. They taught her that show business wasn't glamorous. It was survival. When the tour ended, she took her chances in New York City, chasing the dream that had quietly followed her for years. The city was cruel to newcomers, but Adrienne's determination was sharper than her fear. She started at the bottom, chorus roles, tiny paychecks, crowded apartments, but she never stopped showing up. That persistence eventually landed her a place in Fiddler on the Roof, working alongside a young Bette Midler. For Adrienne, it wasn't just a job. It was proof she belonged. She learned the rhythm of the stage, the power of timing, the discipline of theater, and she knew that if she kept fighting, she could turn this start into something bigger. What she didn't know was that her next role would change everything. It wouldn't just launch her into stardom. It would define her for years, for better or worse. Because when she stepped onto the stage as a tough, unapologetic woman named Rizzo, Adrienne Barbeau stopped being just another face in the crowd and became a name that Broadway would never forget. When Adrienne Barbeau walked onto that Broadway stage in Grease, everything changed. She wasn't just another hopeful actress anymore. She was electric. The moment she embodied Betty Rizzo, the sharp-tongued leader of the Pink Ladies, the audience felt it. Adrienne didn't play Rizzo as a caricature. She lived her. Her performance was bold, vulnerable, and dangerously real. She gave the character layers no one expected, a mix of confidence, sarcasm, and hidden pain that made her both intimidating and heartbreakingly human. For the first time, critics and audiences agreed on one thing: Adrienne Barbeau was a star. Her Tony nomination sealed it, but even more than the recognition, it gave her what she had always craved: validation that she could command a stage on her own terms. But Broadway fame came with its own price. The more successful Grease became, the more Adrienne realized how easily fame could box her in. Casting directors didn't see the depth in her. They saw the tight clothes, the curves, the attitude. Instead of asking her to read for complex roles, they wanted another Rizzo. To them, she was typecast as the tough, sexy woman. Never the intellectual, never the romantic lead. It was flattering, sure, but also suffocating. Adrienne wanted to be recognized for her talent, not her looks. And yet, in the 1970s, Hollywood wasn't known for giving women much of a choice. Despite the frustration, she stayed focused. Night after night, she gave everything she had to that role, determined to prove that she was more than the sum of her appearance. And behind the curtain, she began studying television and film scripts, planning her next move. Broadway had given her the foundation, discipline, strength, and name recognition. But she wanted to reach a wider audience. She knew the next step had to be television. And when opportunity came, it came fast. Norman Lear, already famous for creating All in the Family, noticed her. He saw something different in Adrienne. An edge, a wit, a spark that didn't fit the usual mold. He believed she could bring something fresh to his new show. What Adrienne didn't realize at the time was that this offer would launch her into every American living room, and into a role that would both make her a household name and challenge her in ways she never expected. Because when Maude premiered, Adrienne Barbeau wasn't just an actress anymore. She was part of a television revolution. When Maude hit television screens in 1972, it wasn't just another sitcom. It was a cultural lightning bolt. The show tackled politics, feminism, and social taboos that most networks wouldn't dare touch. And right at the heart of it stood Adrienne Barbeau, playing Carol Traynor, the independent, outspoken daughter of B. Arthur's sharp-tongued Maude. It was the perfect pairing. Two powerful women from different generations clashing and connecting in ways that felt painfully real. Adrienne's performance stood out instantly. She wasn't playing the giggling sidekick or the perfect TV daughter. She played a woman with opinions, boundaries, and fire. Audiences saw a reflection of a new kind of American woman. Ambitious, intelligent, and unafraid to speak her mind. But behind the scenes, Adrienne was still wrestling with the same issue she faced on Broadway: perception. The media quickly latched onto her looks, often writing about her figure before mentioning her talent. She would later admit that at times she felt like she was being marketed more than understood. Even when she delivered heartfelt, layered performances, interviews and magazines seemed fixated on her physical appeal. Hollywood had turned her confidence into a label, and that label was hard to escape. Yet Adrienne never complained publicly. She smiled, worked harder, and let her professionalism speak louder than her frustration. Still, there was a quiet restlessness in her. Television brought her fame, but it didn't fulfill her creatively. She was grateful for Maude's success. It made her a household name and opened doors. But she craved something different, something darker, more cinematic. She wanted to break away from the polished sets and canned laughter and test herself in a world that was raw and unpredictable. Around this time, her life would take a turn that would forever link her to a new era of storytelling. She would soon meet a man whose vision matched her intensity, and together they would redefine what it meant to terrify audiences on screen. Because when Adrienne Barbeau stepped into John Carpenter's world, she wasn't just entering a new genre. She was about to become a legend in one. The shift from sitcom star to horror icon didn't happen overnight, but when it did, it hit like a thunderclap. In 1980, Adrienne Barbeau took a chance on a low-budget ghost story written and directed by a man who, at the time, was quietly changing the landscape of horror: John Carpenter. The two had met years earlier, long before his name became synonymous with fear, and their chemistry was instant. Carpenter saw something in Adrienne that most of Hollywood didn't. He didn't see a type or a label. He saw strength, vulnerability, and a rare screen presence that could anchor a story without saying a word. When he cast her as Stevie Wayne, the sultry late-night radio host in The Fog, it was a role written specifically for her, and it would change her career forever. The film was unlike anything Adrienne had done before. Gone were the bright studio lights of Maude. Now she was standing in the mist, her voice echoing through the eerie silence of a coastal town haunted by its own past. The Fog became an instant cult hit, and Adrienne's performance, calm, commanding, and mysterious, stood out even in the chaos of Carpenter's supernatural vision. Audiences were captivated not just by her beauty, but by the quiet strength she brought to the screen. She wasn't the helpless victim horror had grown used to. She was in control, sharp, and resourceful. A survivor before the term became a genre trope. But behind the curtain of success, something else was happening. Adrienne and Carpenter had fallen in love. The professional partnership soon became a personal one. And in 1979, before The Fog even premiered, the two married. Together they became one of Hollywood's most intriguing creative duos. He, the master of tension. She, the face of fearless female power. Yet fame and marriage are rarely a peaceful mix. As Carpenter's career exploded with films like Halloween and Escape from New York, Adrienne's was following its own unpredictable path. Some studios now labeled her a scream queen, a term that both elevated and trapped her. She appreciated the fans who adored her for it, but she also knew how limiting that label could be. What made Adrienne different from others who carried that title was her attitude. She never saw herself as the victim. In every film, whether she was fighting ghosts, monsters, or human cruelty, she brought the same fire that had fueled her since Broadway. Still, as the spotlight on Carpenter grew brighter, the pressure on their relationship began to build. And when the fog cleared, the story of Adrienne Barbeau's life would take another sharp turn, into the murky swamps of her next role, where the danger wasn't just make-believe, because her next project would test everything: her endurance, her courage, and her ability to stay true to herself when Hollywood once again tried to define her by someone else's vision. By the early 1980s, Adrienne Barbeau had become a face every moviegoer recognized, and a name Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with. She had the charisma of a leading lady, the toughness of an action star, and the emotional range of a dramatic actress. But she was being offered roles that boxed her into horror and pulp. Instead of rejecting that, she chose to own it, to elevate what others dismissed. That attitude brought her to one of the strangest, most dangerous sets of her career, Swamp Thing. Directed by horror visionary Wes Craven, the film was meant to be a comic book-inspired monster story. What Adrienne walked into, however, felt more like a survival challenge than a movie set. The production took place deep in the swamps of South Carolina, humid, bug-infested, and unpredictable. The heat was relentless, the ground unstable, and the air thick enough to choke on. Cast and crew battled snakes, leeches, and exhaustion, while the bulky creature suits melted under the southern sun. Adrienne, however, didn't complain. She powered through mud, mosquitoes, and all-night shoots with the same discipline she'd carried since Broadway. Later, she'd admit that Swamp Thing was one of the hardest shoots of my life, but also one of the most rewarding. Her performance brought warmth and humanity to a story that could have easily turned campy. Then came the controversy. In Europe, an alternate cut of the film surfaced, including a brief bathing scene that wasn't meant for the American release. It was later pulled, but not before tabloids sensationalized it. Adrienne, who had always valued professionalism and privacy, was furious. She'd worked hard to be taken seriously, and now she was being reduced once again to an image. Yet instead of letting it break her, she let it strengthen her resolve. She refused to hide, refused to retreat from the genre that had made her a star. Around the same time, she joined George A. Romero's Creepshow, a darkly humorous horror anthology that allowed her to lean into character acting. It was proof she could laugh at herself and at the industry that had underestimated her. While Creepshow became a cult favorite, Adrienne quietly began shifting focus, realizing that horror, while thrilling, couldn't be her only legacy. Those years in the swamps and shadows gave her something no award could: resilience. She'd learned to survive in environments both literal and professional that were designed to test her limits. But the physical strain and the emotional toll were mounting. Her marriage to John Carpenter was crumbling under the weight of fame and conflicting schedules. By 1984, it was over. Hollywood saw the headlines, but few saw the heartbreak. Adrienne, once again, had to rebuild. Only this time, she wasn't just fighting for roles. She was fighting to redefine herself as a woman, a mother, and an artist. And just when it seemed like her career might fade into the background, she found an entirely new way to use her voice, one that would take her from horror icon to an unexpected second act that no one saw coming. After years of non-stop filming, night shoots, and public scrutiny, Adrienne Barbeau's life entered a storm she could no longer control. Her marriage to John Carpenter had begun as a creative partnership built on admiration and shared ambition. But as his career exploded with back-to-back hits like Halloween and The Thing, Adrienne often found herself standing in his shadow. Hollywood had a cruel habit of defining women by the men beside them, and despite her own success, Adrienne was suddenly labeled the director's wife. The woman who once commanded Broadway was now being asked about her husband's projects more than her own. By 1984, the two quietly divorced, ending one of Hollywood's most fascinating power couples. For Adrienne, it was painful but necessary. She later admitted that stepping away wasn't just about saving herself. It was about reclaiming her identity. Motherhood gave her a new sense of purpose. Her son, Cody Carpenter, became the center of her world. Adrienne scaled back her film work to focus on raising him, but she never disappeared completely. Instead, she re-emerged in unexpected ways. Voice acting, guest roles, and even writing. In a time when most actresses her age were being pushed aside, Adrienne was reinventing herself yet again. She became a writer, releasing her memoir, There Are Worse Things I Could Do, which revealed the grit, humor, and heartbreak behind her life in show business. Fans were surprised by her honesty. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She wrote about being objectified, about bad contracts, broken trust, and learning to find her worth outside of applause. It was the story of a survivor, not a victim. Still, the industry hadn't changed much. Women over 40 were often invisible in Hollywood, but Adrienne refused to disappear. In the late 1980s, she took bold television roles that reminded audiences of her strength and depth. Then, in the early 90s, she met playwright and producer Billy Van Zandt, who reignited both her personal and professional spirit. They married in 1992, and in 1997, at 51, Adrienne gave birth to twin boys. For many, that was shocking. For Adrienne, it was liberation. She had rewritten the rules of what a woman in Hollywood could do. But even with joy came struggle. Balancing motherhood and career while aging in an industry obsessed with youth wasn't easy. She once said that Hollywood didn't scare her anymore because she'd already faced worse. That defiance became her quiet rebellion. She didn't chase fame the way others did. She let the work come to her, and when it didn't, she created her own path. Adrienne Barbeau had gone from starlet to survivor, from icon to author, from ingenue to matriarch. And yet, she wasn't done. Just when people thought they'd seen the last of her, she would return once again. This time as a voice, a storyteller, and a living legend who refused to fade into nostalgia. As Hollywood moved on to new faces and faster fame, Adrienne Barbeau quietly built something more lasting: legacy. She no longer chased the spotlight, she shaped it on her own terms. In the 2000s, while many of her contemporaries faded from the screen, Adrienne found a new voice, literally. Her deep, smoky tone became her trademark in the world of animation and video games. Millions heard her as Catwoman in Batman the Animated Series, never realizing that the same woman once screamed through John Carpenter's The Fog. It was a reinvention few saw coming, and it suited her perfectly. Behind the microphone, there were no limits, no age, no typecasting, just talent, and Adrienne had plenty of that. At the same time, she returned to writing, crafting a series of darkly humorous mystery novels that blended her love for horror and wit. Titles like Vampires of Hollywood and Love Bites proved she hadn't lost her edge. She had simply evolved. Her writing was bold, sharp, and unapologetically her, filled with the same mix of charm and bite that defined her performances. Fans who grew up watching her on screen now devoured her books, surprised to discover that the Scream Queen could also make them laugh out loud. Adrienne had gone from being directed by others to becoming the creator of her own worlds, something she dreamed of since her Broadway days. Her return to television in the 2010s and beyond further solidified her reputation as one of Hollywood's quiet survivors. She appeared in shows like Dexter, Sons of Anarchy, and American Horror Stories, always bringing a magnetic presence that demanded attention. Even small roles felt bigger when she was in them. That mix of warmth and danger she carried made every scene richer. Younger actors often spoke about how generous she was on set, mentoring without ego, listening without judgment. She had become in many ways a bridge between generations of performers. Off-screen, Adrienne used her platform to speak about aging, self-worth, and reinvention in an industry obsessed with perfection. She reminded audiences that beauty fades, but purpose doesn't. Her refusal to conform became an inspiration not just to women in Hollywood, but to anyone who had ever been told their time was over. "I just keep doing what I love," she once said. "And as long as they let me, I'll keep showing up." Decades after her Broadway debut, Adrienne Barbeau remains a name whispered with admiration among fans of film, theater, and horror alike. She's the rare kind of artist who has lived many lives, each one braver than the last. And through it all, she's never stopped moving forward, never stopped creating, and never stopped reminding Hollywood that strength isn't about survival alone, it's about transformation. Today, Adrienne Barbeau stands as one of the few women in Hollywood who has truly lived through every phase of fame and still kept her voice intact. From the Broadway lights of Grease to the eerie glow of The Fog, from sitcom laughter to horror screams, she has seen the industry at its most glamorous and its most unforgiving. What makes her story so powerful isn't just the roles she played. It's the way she refused to let any of them define her. She has been the rebel daughter, the seductive survivor, the misunderstood muse, the nurturing mother, the sharp-witted writer, and the enduring legend. Each chapter of her life added a layer of strength, making her story one of constant reinvention rather than decline. Hollywood has a habit of forgetting its women once they age, but Adrienne made sure her story couldn't be erased. Even in her late 70s, she continues to work, appearing at conventions, lending her voice to new projects, and greeting fans who never stopped admiring her. They don't just see an actress from a bygone era, they see resilience personified. She was there when women in entertainment had to fight for every inch of respect, and she never once backed down. Every line on her face now tells a story of battles fought, dreams pursued, and dignity preserved. What makes Adrienne's legacy unique is how quietly she built it. She didn't rely on scandal or controversy to stay relevant. Instead, she let her body of work speak for her, and it speaks volumes. Her horror films continue to inspire new generations of filmmakers. Her memoir still resonates with women searching for their own identity beyond the roles life assigns them. And her voice, deep, familiar, unwavering, remains one of the most recognizable in pop culture. In a world that rewards noise and novelty, Adrienne Barbeau chose endurance. She didn't burn out, she adapted. She didn't chase fame, she earned respect. And she didn't just survive Hollywood, she mastered it. Decades after her first curtain call, Adrienne's story reminds us that power doesn't always come from being the loudest in the room. Sometimes it comes from knowing exactly who you are and never letting the world rewrite your script. If you enjoyed learning about Adrienne Barbeau's incredible journey from Broadway to Hollywood legend, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment below telling us what part of her story inspired you the most. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another untold story of Hollywood's most fascinating icons. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.